Hello, Amal. Good evening, everyone. So I'm from the Free State, actually, and I also lived in India. I'm staying now in Pretoria. I'm just saying this so that you don't think when I speak that maybe English is my first language. You know? I had to speak at an event of TLF in the inner city of Pretoria in English. It was about the same, maybe a little bit more people than this evening. And I thought it went actually well, because every now and again people laughed, and it looked like they responded. And then afterwards, Robin, the one girl, said to me, she said, Jaco, it was okay, you know, it didn't go too bad. She said, but just in the future, remember, it's not the Jews and the genitals. It's the Jews and the Gentiles. You know? So is Eysterplaat, are you here tonight? Just show a hand there. That's lekker. Are you going to join us this whole week? Yes. Gaan lekker wees. Afrikaans. Ja, ek gaan maar so nou en dan I'll mix my language most probably, and I'll do this, and then you help me with the word, you know? I think I once had to say bowl, and then I said bowel, and then they also said, yeah, it's not bowel. Okay, so we are, this morning we spoke about this, that we live our lives in three places. We have a public life, we have a community life, and we have a secret life. And the public life is kind of what's on your CV. It's what most people that just know you from far away, the things people generally know about you. Maybe the things on your profile and so on. It's your public life. It's your workspace. It's there where you school, maybe if you're still in school, your public image. And then you have a community life, which is very important, and it's your relationship life, close relationships, your husband, your wife, your children, your family, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, and church is supposed to be a very big part of that. Church is supposed to be more than just an organization that organizes spiritual events. It's supposed to be a community where people share everything and no one lacks anything. And we're going to talk about that tomorrow night. Tomorrow night's and the night after that, it's going to be two very important themes. We're going to look at the first pictures of the church just as Pentecost happened. But then we also have a secret life. And we don't even think about it. But there's a big part of your life that nobody knows. It's your inner life. It's that they say the most honest place is your pillow. When everybody's sleeping, everybody in their house is sleeping, and it's just you and your pillow. And it's the things, and you can't sleep, and you're lying awake. It's what happens when you wake up late at night. One guy once said, integrity is when you wake up late at night and you're thirsty, and you don't drink from the bottle, you throw yourself a glass, you know. Your secret life, that the habits that you have, the things you do there. And I think too often we think the public life, if we think about our troubles, about our success, we think there's a kind of this pressure. I think it from childhood we have this voice that always shouts to us, you must look good. You must, the big endeavor in life is to look good. And you must impress. And that's what life is about. And we would always say there's group pressure on kids. But let's face it, there's a lot of group pressure on adults also. And but often with teenagers, you will see it very clearly that they fall for this lie that the most important thing is it's more important to look good than to be good or become good. A guy once saw people in counseling. He said he found that many people who would come for therapy or for counseling don't want to be better; they just want to feel better and look better. But the things really change when they want to be better, when they want to change the core, not just the image. And Henry Nouwen said that a tall tree with shallow roots is a dangerous thing. As jy hoogte het sonder diepte, is dit eintlik gevaarlik. And I think we see it sometimes in our country, that somebody has a big job, huge responsibility, but there was no inner struggle through which the roots could have grown. You know, roots grow from struggle and from falling and standing up and getting it wrong and, you know, worrying late at night, and you kind of grow some deep roots where nobody sees it, your inner struggle with this thing, and it kind of gives you the ability to be able to handle the responsibility of the height, and then you can bear the fruits. The public life is not unimportant. Jesus says we should put our lamp in a place where it will shine in such a way that God will get the glory. So we have a calling in our public life. But too often, I think, when we talk about our issues, or when we talk about our feeling that your lives don't have purpose, about the reasons why things is not all together, we don't have peace, and we don't have enough kindness or whatever in our lives, we think the reason is out there. But we're going to start this week and say maybe we should start from underground. Maybe that's the most important thing. There's this story of a guy who built a yacht, sailboat, and he got everything right. He was working so hard in the harbor. People would, when the neighbors come to visit, or when the family come to visit from another town, they would come and they would go and show, everybody would go to the harbor, you know. When you live in a small town, then there's just one or two interesting things. Everybody, and that was one of those interesting things. You must come and see this guy's yacht, this guy's sailboat that he's building. And everybody was impressed, and the guy worked really hard on it. He had the most beautiful copper work, you know, a compass and beautiful sails and little round windows and woodwork and so on. And then the story goes, it's quite a sad story, that it was the day to baptize this boat. And they normally baptize a boat by breaking a bottle of champagne, I think, on it, and giving the boat its name. And they broke the champagne. There was an orchestra that was playing, and this big band, and everybody was there with fireworks and crackers, and they cheered as this guy sailed out of the harbor. But when he hit the first swell, the first waves just outside of the harbor, he couldn't handle it. The boat just tipped. And they had to go and rescue the guy, and the boat sank. And what was the problem? The problem was this guy worked with everything above the water. But it's not the stuff above the water that keeps it afloat on a sea. I sailed a bit in my life, quite a few places actually. And they say the most important thing on a single keel boat is that there's a keel down underneath. Normally when you see in the harbor, when sailboats are on land, they're very high, isn't it? It's because of that big fin underneath, and there's a huge weight. I think it's something like a third of the weight of the boat, or a quarter of the weight of the boat. And even sometimes they would talk in storms that the boat rolled. You know, it was upside down, but always that weight would pull it up again. And this guy had everything in order, but he didn't have the weight under the water. And he failed horribly. And when the moment when he needed it most, it messed everything up. And I think our lives are also like that. That it's important to work under the water. We have the secret life. And it's important, we said it this morning also, not only to have exceptions, uitsonderings wat mooi is in jou community lewe, jou publieke lewe of jou privaat lewe, nie, jou geheime lewe nie. You have to have not only exceptions, you know, now and then I do something good when I'm all alone. You need actually habits that's good. You need to do as a rule over and over and over again the right thing. And when we talk about these things, you must remember that all these spiritual disciplines, call it whatever you want, it works like this. A guy came to he met his friend in the street. He said, "You're a liar. You made a fool of me." His friend said, "Why?" He said, "You promised me that if I go to the gym and I do weights, that I'm going to get a six-pack. You know, if I run that treadmill and I do all those push-ups and sit-ups and I put in time there, that I'm going to get a six-pack, I'm going to get muscles, I'm going to lose weight." He said, "Nothing of that. Nothing. You lied to me. He said, I went there 3 times now. Nothing changed. So what will you say to a guy like that? You'll say, not 3 times. Not even 3 times a week will be enough for 2 or 3 weeks. You're going to have to make it a habit over a very long time. And you're going to have to, it's in the repetition that you see the results. So when we talk about prayer and especially some of these secret life habits, some of us maybe might say, yeah, I've tried it, but it felt very empty. It didn't really work. But the answer lies in putting in the work over and over again before you'll start to see the results. So there's a verse about this. Proverbs 4 verse 23. It says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Ek onthou op skool, het die juffrou tot vervelings toe altyd, as sy moet open, elke juffrou. Wees veral versigtig met wat in jou hart omgaan, want dit bepaal jou hele lewe. Onthou julle dit, julle juffrouens toch gesê. So, but she was right. It's a very important verse. What is inside, what is in your heart will determine your whole life. I spoke to Karua, some of you know her well, this week. Just as I arrived at the airport, I went there. We had a breakfast together, and we talked about just about every saint you know has one thing in common. They lived a life of enormous inner struggle. It's as if nobody will ever do anything saintly. There's a guy once said, there's never been someone who lived a life of ease whose name is worth remembering. That everybody who did something for the kingdom of God, if it's Mother Teresa or Henry Nouwen or St. Francis of Assisi, they've had a life of struggle. They had an inner struggle, and we should not spare ourselves that. We should actually embrace it as Jim, as it's a painful thing, but it's good. It's worthwhile, and it brings out something good in us. So, and I'm going to try to make it very simple tonight. I think there's 3 challenges, and there might be many others. The one challenge is the dark stuff in your life, in your secret life. You might have a secret sin, a secret thought, a secret something that's a secret dark thing. And as flowers bloom in the sunshine, issues bloom in the dark. They grow in the dark. Die goed groei, en dit is soos drake wat in die donker groei, in die grot groei. And it's amazing. If you're in ministry, and I think Johannes can also say that, when people would often come and tell you their secrets, we're carrying a lot of secrets of people that we can never tell no one. But people have enormous dragons that they struggle with, that has grown in the dark. And then we have some really beautiful things, beautiful inner life things, awareness, wonder, things that we've done or we've seen, we've discovered. So it's both sides. I don't think we should just make as if it's the one or the other. But I think a good tip, and even if you forget anything tonight, try to at least think about this. And I know it's not always that simple, but there's something in this principle. It's a good idea to say, I want to bring the dark stuff to the surface, and I wanted to try to take a few of the good stuff to the secret place. What do I mean by that? In Ephesians, Paul says when something is brought to the light, it's being dealt with. They say the Catholics have much less stress than the Protestants like us, because we are a lot about shame and hiding and so on and guilt. but they have these little wat noem hulle dit, biegkamertjies, these confession rooms. Have you seen it in the movies? And they've got these confession rooms, and they say that it really does something for you when you go in there. No matter what your secret is, it's the worst thing. You're so ashamed that you're struggling with this thing, but you can go in there. And it's 100% confidential. And you've seen it in the movies. And somebody would go in and say, Father, I have sinned. And then he would say, yes, my son, how many times has it been since your last confession? And then you say, it's been 3 years, Father. And then you tell him the story. And it's as if just bringing it to the light really helps, bringing it to the surface. They say there's a lot of healing. I've seen it with people in therapy, or Echo started, I had a little counseling facility at a school that people would walk with very dark demons, with memories they don't know what to do with. Some of the darkest memories is things that other people have done to you. Some of it is, for some of the kids we work with, is things that people were supposed to do that were close to them, their parents or whatever, that didn't do it, they didn't care for them, they abandoned them. But also it seems like some of the heaviest things you can walk with is the things that you've done wrong, the cruelty you've caused, the harm you've done. And it is amazing what people in this one life we have are carrying with them. And it's as if the weight just becomes more, as if this thing grows. It pulls you down more and more and more. And it really helps to bring it out. There's a lot of verses about that. Confess your sins to each other. Bring it to the light. Find someone, a psychologist or a dominee that you can trust. I always say, if you want to know who not to trust, dis daai tannie wat skinder of haar oom wat oor almal wat vir ander mense se geheime vertel, moenie vir hulle dit vertel, jou geheim vertel nie, hoor. So if somebody else tells you someone else's secrets, don't trust them with your secrets. But there are people that you can trust. But they're not going to come to you. You're going to have to find them. So bring it to the surface. If there's an inner struggle, something dark that you're carrying with you, bring it to the surface and continue doing it until you are better. But give it some light. Ek sal dit vir die kinders sê, moenie laat jou trots vir jou belangriker wees as jou vryheid nie. Nee? But it happens that our pride is more important than our freedom. And then we struggle with this thing in the dark. And I've seen it sometimes that a guy would come out with something that he struggled with for years, for his whole life, and now he's 30-something, and he comes out with it, and he thinks, nearly always that he would say, I wish when I was 20, I had the guts to just bring it out and to let it being dealt with. And I didn't just carry this in the dark. It made a lot of trouble in my life. Okay, so that's the one thing. And then the second one that I said is to have some goodness that you bring to the secret place. I think it's a good idea for every Christian to have a few secrets, good secrets with God. You must have the good things as secrets. To have somebody that you are helping, something good that you're doing. Jesus says your left hand shouldn't know what your right hand is doing. Okay? Your left hand shouldn't tweet what your right hand is doing. You shouldn't know what your right hand is doing. That to have a few secrets. It's something. Just when my life changed when I was a young boy, there was a guy that I looked up, a spiritual leader, and he said that, and I thought, wow, it's astonishing to think, and it's a good principle. I wish I've done that more. To have a few good secrets with God. Te sê ek gaan iemand help, ek gaan ietsie doen, ek gaan nie alberbrek nie, niemand gaan weet nie, niemand nie. And it's a good thing for a church also. You know, they say your marketing shouldn't be bigger than your ministry. Heidi Baker said you should oversell and undermarket. People should be surprised for the depth that they find. One day after you've died, that they, maybe never they'll find it, but maybe God will reveal it in heaven. But they should rather be surprised about the depth, the kindness, the goodness that was there. So that's just two things that I think really helps. And then the third, I don't know what to call it, habit in your secret life that really, for a Christian, I think makes all the difference. And I want to say a few things about that, is the habit of taking time out in prayer. To have a life of struggle with God. That's what prayer is. And you can go through the history from Paul to the church fathers, to St. Francis of Assisi, from Martin Luther to Martin Luther King, from Billy Graham to Heidi Baker and Mother Teresa. If there's one thing all these people have in common, literally every one of them, is a life of struggling in prayer before God. And I think we should call it struggling because it's not that easy. And I don't know if you've seen, but after Mother Teresa died, there was this little diary of her that came out, and there was all the struggles with God in there. And I asked, we had Shane Claiborne staying in the Table View house just when we opened it, and he's quite a famous author in America. And I asked him about that, because Mother Teresa's book just came out. Me and Neil and him was having coffee there in Cape Town, and I don't know if you remember Neil, but he said, but Jaco, you must look, all the prophets struggled with God. They didn't just have everything together. They struggled with God. And we should do that. We should intentionally come before God with our questions, with our doubts, doing introspection. Have a part of our life should be struggling with God. And there might be beautiful moments, and there might be sad moments, and there might be disillusionment about your own life. But to struggle with God rather than to struggle without God. A guy once came to me. He said, he's been through a bad thing. He said, it feels as if I'm praying and it's hitting, ek bid teen die dak vas. It's hitting the roof, you know. En toe sê ek vir hom, maar miskien is die probleem dat jy bid asof God bo kan die dak is. Miskien is dit nodig om te onthou, maar Jesus eintlik vir ons kom sê, maar God is ook onder die dak. Hy's ook saam met ons in ons struggle. Jy weet, in Afrikaanse literatuur het ons hierdie dagstukkie boeke, verskriklik baie. En maar ek vra partykeer, waar is die nagstukkies? Daai eerste boek van my Wakum nou nog nie op die rak sit, toe skryf ek vir hulle, wat is die probleem? Is die probleem dat jy 'n bietjie nagstukkies ook kyk? Dat dis nie so gewild onder ons Christene, but there was a lot of these night pieces in the Bible, and we spoke about how I reminded him how David, the heroes of faith, how he was struggling, and he wrote some of the Psalms in the cave. The other prophet was thrown into a pit, and there in the pit he was crying out to God, and it's in the Bible. And he once cried out and he said, God, you must let me. You know, he said horrible things to God. I don't think it's true, but as somehow God said, put it in the book. Maybe other people, when they feel like it, they won't run from me. They will also be honest with me. And we spoke about Paul, who wrote some of the most beautiful stuff. The biggest part of the New Testament he wrote, a lot of it from jail, unjustly being put in jail. And jail was a bit of a hole, you know. It wasn't a jail like it's today. Not that it's easy today. But to have that inner struggle, we talked about that, and I said maybe a good place to start would just be to tell God how you struggle to pray. Start there, if you struggle to pray. You know, it's Pentecost, and there's a verse in the Bible that says, if you struggle to pray, ask God, and His Spirit will help you. He will guide you. Have you read that verse? And I said, yeah, just start telling God. Be honest with Him. And I saw him a week later, and he said, you know what? He said, I started by telling God how I struggled to pray. And after a while, I realized I'm actually I'm really praying now, you know. Telling God how I struggled to pray. And he said, but hy het 'n nagstuk geskryf. He wrote one of these dark psalms. I don't know if you like me, sometimes I go through a bit of a desperate time and I just want a psalm to give me a bit of strength. Then I open my Bible and it's one of those dark psalms. Ek bedoel in Afrikaans, daar's 'n boek klaagliedere. There's a book Lamentations. En Prediker is nog meer depro. En dan dink jy, ag nee, asseblief Here, waar is Psalm 23 weer? Ek soek net. And this guy went through and he wrote one of those dark depro psalms. There's so much of that in the Bible. And he wrote it before God. But he said for the first time he didn't feel guilty. He felt he was also David in the cave. He was the prophet in the pit. He was Paul unjustly in jail. And he could, with boldness, met vryheid, sonder skuldgevoel, kon hy vulnerable en donker wees voor God. He could be that before God. One of the most important principles when we pray, we want to answer to this call to have this secret life of prayer. And I'm speaking about this also because Skalk Joseph will know we've had this Wednesday morning prayer meeting in Valeria also, and we stopped. And now last week we started again. So at last, Wednesdays, we've got a new house father, the same house where he was, he's now running it for us. But one of the most important principles I've learned from a guy called Ron Rolheiser. It's an amazing author. And he said the following thing. He said in the last year before his mom died, she was in one of these care facilities in the old age home. And he had the privilege to visit her just about every day. And he said it was so wonderful, and he really thanks God for that year that he could visit his mom just about every day in that place. He would sit next to her bed and they would talk. He said, but if you have to be honest, a lot of times there wasn't that much to say. They were just saying the old things again, the same things. How are you? How do you feel? Same words. He said sometimes we talked about the old days, old stories they've told before. Sometimes there was something new to tell, something new to remember. He says a lot of times it was just quiet. He would just sit on and every now and again he would just see if when's the time past now? Can I go already? But he said the most important thing he learned, and there was this invisible bond between him and his mom that was so special, mystical, between him and his mom that he's so thankful for. He said, but the most important thing he realized is that the most important principle was showing up. Just showing up. And then something happens, something is built, not necessarily because of the meaning, die inhoud van die woorde, the meaning of the words. Not only because of that, but just being in each other's presence, aware of each other's presence. There was a mystical bond that was built between them that he will never forget. It was so special, he can't really put it into words. And then he says, but he thinks the same is true about prayer. The most important principle about the secret life of prayer is showing up. Is to show up and to continue showing up. To show up when you feel like it, and to show up when you don't feel like it. To show up, I found that in my life, then when I felt that really didn't feel like it, I needed it the most. Wanneer ek die minste lus gevoel het daarvoor, het ek dikwels die meeste nodig gehad. That's discipline. Discipline is to keep on doing something that's right, even when you don't feel like it, even when it's difficult, to continue, that's the gym principle, to continue doing the right thing. Jy moet 'n bietjie hardkoppig te wees. I once saw a teenager, I said to him, you're stubborn. And he thought I was, wat's beledig? Insulting him. I said, I'm not insulting you. I said, you're stubborn. I said, but nobody gets anywhere in life without being stubborn. We just have to get you now to be stubborn about the right things. Huh? And you know what? These principles, you're going to have to be stubborn about it. You're going to have to be stubborn about showing up, showing out when you feel like it, showing up when you don't feel like it. Showing up when you have something to praise God for, but also showing up and keep showing up when it feels empty and it's quiet and you sit there in doubt even, to continue showing up. It seems like that's the secret of the saints, showing up. Ek gaan lees selfs Martin Luther's stories and so on. They kept showing up, often in struggle. And sometimes there might be wonderful feelings, and sometimes there might just be silence. And it might be, Mother Teresa, a journalist spoke to her, he said, so when you talk to God, what do you tell him? She said, no, most of the time, I don't tell him much, I just listen. And then the journalist scratched his head and he said, if you just listen, what does God tell you then? And she said, most of the time I think he also just listens. And then she said to him, and if you can't understand it, I can't explain it. There's something just being in God's presence, and that's the challenge for tonight, is to see if there's something dark in your life, to bring it to the surface. That your pride would not be more important than your freedom. That there's some good stuff, to have a principle in your life, not to tell all the good things that you're doing to everybody, but to have some secrets with God, to have some good stuff in the secret place. And the other challenge is to show up and to keep on showing up. I think actually the showing up principle, me and Neil spoke briefly about that today. I think right through this reeks, these next few nights, I think that's going to be maybe the most important theme. It's the thing that makes community happen, is people showing up, not as an exception, but as a rule, as a habit. And it's also important in our public life. Making a difference out there is to start to show up, to figure out where I must show up to shine my light, and to continue showing up. I think it's one of the most important things. Jesus did this. If we're challenging each other this week to read the 4 Gospels and to just put Jesus in the center again. I spoke to, what is this guy, Leonard Sweet, and he said, no, Jesus shouldn't be in the center, he should be everywhere. You know, to put Jesus just in the everywhere again, to make him the most important person in the room, which is not true in church often. He's the most important one in our songs, and he's the most important one in our testimonies and our proclamation of faith or whatever. But he's not really the most important one on our budgets or on our schedules or in our relationships and when we stand before our enemies or whatever, to really make him the most important one. And if you would read the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and let Jesus disturb you a bit. Shane Claiborne said he comforts the disturbed and he disturbs the comfortable. If you would let Jesus disturb you a bit, dat hy jou so 'n bietjie uit jou gemaksoon uitdruk. Hy die rykes en die godsdienstiges uitgefreek. So as jy in een van daai 2 groepe is, gaan hy jou waarskynlik 'n bietjie uitfreek. But if you read the 4 Gospels, you'll see one of the things that repeats, and repeating was a way of emphasis, was that Jesus would go to a lonely place. He would go into solitude. I think our life should be a life of solitude, a life of community, and a life of service. But Jesus would often, for tonight's sake, we would focus on that. He would often go to a place of solitude. The Gospels calls it a lonely place. And I'll read you a few verses. Mark 1, I mean, it's the oldest Gospel, the shortest Gospel. The other Gospels use this as a source. But right in the beginning, Mark 1 already, it says very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up. He left the house and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. When have you last done that? It really could change your life if that could become a habit. Mark 6, Jesus said to his disciple, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest for a while. And with the big things that happened in Jesus' life, with his baptism, according to the Synoptic Gospels, according to all of them, just after he was baptized, he went for 40 days to the desert. I mean, talk about taking time out in prayer, in a desolate place, in a lonely place. And before he was crucified, of course, he would go to the Garden of Gethsemane and pray the whole night there. I think we've lost that a bit. And I know prayer doesn't make sense really, does it? If God already knows what's happening, as hy klaar weet wat gaan aan and so on, But Tony Campolo, he said the following, he said, I tried to pray and I tried not to pray, and praying works better. And I found sometimes I'm an unbelieving philosopher in my head. I would complicate things and I would argue all kinds of arguments in which there's very little of God's left sometimes, to be honest. But I also found, and Jung said there's these different personalities inside of us, but I also find that there's a child in me who wants to pray like a child. And I found that I should let the child, the old man in me can do the philosophical discussion and have the struggle and so on, but sometimes I should just let the child do the praying. Sometimes there's a place for the struggle, we said that, but sometimes also there's just that place where you just say, man, I want to let the child in me do the praying. And I want to just pray like a child before God, who's a great God, I gave this, we had Echo Kids at the schools, and I said I'm so much into making speeches and all kinds of other things, not ministry. And I said, I just want to be grounded a bit. And I said to Emmy those days, I want to also, have a class again that I teach Bible study to the grade. They gave me a grade 1 class. And it was a little multicultural class. And there was a little guy in that class, I tell you, he looked just like Desmond Tutu. Little boy, just this big, very thin, very timid, extremely intelligent. And I had the opportunity to, me and Jan Tron nog, was het nagmaal gebruik saam met Desmond Tutu. So I was a bit in that mind, And I saw that little boy, and a few times I think by accident, a few times I actually called him Desmond, But what fascinated me, and that's why I called him Desmond, I think, is that when I went home and I had that class for a year, I would try to imagine what Desmond Tutu would look like as a child. And then I thought, but what would Donald Trump look like as a child? And what would Biden look like as a child? And Mandela and Eugene Blanche and you name it. And then I thought, well, the difference, the distance in intellect between me and little Desmond in my class is much less than between me and God. And what if God is looking at all of us like a bunch of toddlers? En hy sien net hierdie, en hy dink, kyk hoe windie is hierdie enetjie. En kyk hoe lyk daai een. And all of them are like little kleutertjies. They at Neil's house now, they were playing these kleutertjies. These little toddlers were just playing and making noises and doing stupid stuff. And sometimes you get a bit mad at them, but you think, it's only a stupid little child. That's funny, whatever. And then I thought, maybe God sees us like that. And even, we're much smaller compared to him than little Desmond is compared to us. And I thought, wow, yeah, of course. And sometimes when I speak, and you'll see here in this week, we're going to talk about that. I tell you, tomorrow, the night after tomorrow night, don't come with your new car, because we're going to talk about Jesus' ideas about money and material possessions and so on. But then somebody would say, but don't God like us now because we are privileged or rich or whatever? And then I say, no, man, I think it's like the grandma is there. All the little children is playing there. Al die klein kleutertjies. En dan's hierdie enetjie 'n bietjie twitch en is not neusie en daai enetjie is skaam en so aan, maar hier's die ander klomp. Hulle eet al die koekies en hou dit vir hulle self, speel met al die speelgoed. En dan gaan die ouma mos sê op 'n stadium, ag nee man, gaan speel 'n bietjie met hom ook. Deel 'n bietjie daai koekies. Julle, dit is mos vir ons almal die koekies. And you can imagine that God feels like that. That's why wanneer hy kwaad is vir ryk mense. Mahatma Gandhi het gesê, there's enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. If you love your children, if you really love them, if you created them, you died for them, you don't want them to be excluded and mense met cruel of lelik of hoogmoedig met hulle wees. Dink bietjie daaroor. So sometimes it's good just to let the child pray. Me and Chris, we had wine today. Neil's house, Chris Swart, he stays now here. He's spearfishing. I once went spearfishing with him, and there was a shark, a bull shark. And I tell you, without me trying, I suddenly heard the child praying me. Skielik te bin die kind. Sê, Here, help, asseblief. Suddenly they say the biggest atheists in the trenches would cry out to God like a child often. And sometimes we should also do that, not complicated, just cry out to God. I think the most important thing, there's not a right prayer or a wrong prayer, there's just an honest prayer. Want in die Bybel daar's maar baie genres van gebede dwars deur die Bybel. There's just an honest prayer, an honest crying out to God, honest struggling with God. And I don't care where you are, what you do, but I want to challenge you tonight to show up and to keep on showing up. I think I've said enough. Let's pray. Let's do that. I'm going to give you a moment. Maybe you just want to make an appointment with God where you somewhere in the next day or so, even if it's a very short time, you're just going to say, God, I want to make some time. I want to make an appointment later tonight. tomorrow morning, and I want to start making plans to make it a habit in my life again. Here, U sê in die woord dat U Gees ons sal help om te bid. En dis wat ons bid in Pinkstertyd, dat U ons net sal wil, dit kom nie vir ons so natuurlik nie, dat U ons weer sal help daarmee, dat dit 'n gewoonte sal wees in ons lewens. En as ons dit reeds sê, dat dit nog sal groei, 'n groter gewoonte sal word. In Jesus se naam. Amen.